Hello, everyone. Very welcome to NERV's first panel event, and especially a very special welcome to our 4 panelists. Siobhan and I will be your hosts for the event, and you can look out for Darby in the comments. And also a very happy belated Star Wars Day to everyone. Then also please do check out our polls. So we have a few poll questions just to get to know our audience. And I encourage the panelists to also respond there so we can just get an idea of where everyone is at. And yeah, it'll be nice to get to know everyone. Then I am Julianne, and I am currently a PhD student at Stellenbosch University. My research focuses on the binocular rivalry paradigm and its effects on human consciousness. And I am particularly interested in consciousness and decision-making studies. I will now hand over to Siobhan to introduce herself, and then we will have each of our panelists also one by one introduce themselves.
Thanks, Julianne. Hi, everyone. I'm Siobhan. I'm currently working as a software engineer at an early stage computer vision startup. I am on a slight detour from neuroscience, but my passion does lie in using deep learning methods to better understand the neural mechanisms that underline our thoughts, actions, and decisions.
Cool, it's me. So yeah, hi everyone, I'm Senor. I work as a software engineer at Aerobotics. We build basically software for the agriculture industry using like a mix of machine learning, computer vision, and I guess AI. Yeah, cool. And so yeah, I started off as a data scientist for about a year and a bit, and then kind of like moved over to a software engineering role focused on supporting our machine learning efforts. Cool.
Cool. Hi everyone, my name is Kalyab. I'm a research engineer at InstaDeep. I work in the research team focusing on multi-agent reinforcement learning. Before that, I spent some time in software and some time in applied machine learning. So hopefully experience across different aspects of machine learning will be useful in this conversation. Yeah, that's me.
Cool, my turn. I'm Lydia. I work at Spatial Edge as a machine learning engineer, and I started my machine learning journey way back in undergrad as an electrical and electronic engineer, and did my master's focused on the application of machine learning, and now I am productionizing machine learning models for Spatial Edge.
Hi everyone, so my name is Jeannie. So currently I work as an NLP researcher at Autoscriber, where we're building a toolkit to automatically summarize documentation consultations in Dutch. We're a small team, but we are hiring and we have unlimited leave days. So reach out to me on LinkedIn if you're interested. And yeah, I started my journey as a computer science student at Stellenbosch University. In addition, I studied maths and stats, and then I followed that with an honors in data science, during which I started my NLP journey. So I did a dissertation in predicting stock market movements using news headlines. And I also then started my internship journey. So I have done internships at 5 different companies. So I've done internships at Allen Gray, Medical Research, Capitec, Ernst & Young, and I think there's one more, but I don't remember now. And then I've also worked as a contract data scientist at Capitec, and there I did consulting at EY, and then worked as a consultant at KPI, where I worked with big companies, helping them derive get value out of their data. So I took a bit of a detour to data science, and now I'm back at NLP.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone. Yes, so I think this will be a very exciting event. We are very excited to have a discussion about navigating the industry of artificial intelligence. And I will now hand over to Siobhan, who will be running our discussion for the event.
Thank you. And again, massive welcome to our panelists and all our attendees. We're really excited to be online with everyone this evening. Tonight's format is really simple. We've split it up into 3 sections. The first one is all about developing a toolkit and getting a feel for machine learning in industry. The second session will focus on the latest advancements in tech and everything that's exciting around there. And then we'll end up with the slightly more speculative and discuss what's possibly coming in our future. Please feel free to post as many questions as you'd like yourselves. We encourage questions from the audience, and then also vote on your favorite questions. Due to time constraints, we might not get to everything, so the most popular questions will most likely be asked first. And of course, the comment section is there for you as well. We'll be engaging with the comments, so please don't sit behind your screens without engaging in discussion. We'd love to hear from you as the audience as well. Okay, so our first question, I'm gonna start nice and simple. What attracted you to a career in machine learning in industry? Let's start with Senyo.
Yeah, so for me, it was just kind of like pure excitement and just like, I just thought it was crazy. So when I was in varsity, started playing around with machine learning, kind of like fell upon a course, and was just blown away at like what you could do. I was like, can computers do this? And then you try something else and like they could do that. And I was just completely blown away. And then the more I learned about it, like the crazier it became. And so, yeah, from there, just started like interning around the internet data profit first, and then internet aerobotics, where I've been ever since. And yeah, it was just purely just like exhilaration, if I'm honest. Yeah.
Lydia, how about you?
Well, I made machine learning when I competed in a high-performance computing competition in Frankfurt, and we had to. My job we're a whole team competing, and my job was to do this new thing where we use machine learning to identify capture images. So let me rather say the competition has never used machine learning before as one of their benchmark tests for supercomputers. And so it was completely new and unexpected. And I asked my friend Ilan to help me. I'm sure some people know Ilan. And that's the kind of, I think I owe it all to Ilan. So made a machine learning algorithm to identify capture images. And then from there, it just spiraled out of control, maybe. And my master's, I did application of machine learning for the SKA, the square kilometer array, and I used machine learning and the electromagnetic fields to identify failed antennas in antenna array. And now, well, I've always been interested in using machine learning algorithms that other people developed and applying it to a problem to solve some pressing issues. And now I'm discovering kind of a new part to it, to me, which is big data and productionizing these machine learning algorithms. So how we all have created a machine learning algorithm model to identify something. My job as a machine learning engineer now is to use that model that you created and productionize it. So automate it, monitor it, and make sure that it's reproducible. So add the scientific rules and infrastructure to it.
Fantastic. I'm already noticing a theme of like getting swept up in the chaos. It's fantastic. Jeannie, would you like to go next?
Sure. So I like I said, I did my dissertation in my honors year, and that was the first time I encountered like machine learning. But for me, it was completely new. I didn't even know where to look for papers. So I did a very basic like approach to natural language processing. So I extracted like of the features and stuff, and then I pushed it through like a PCA algorithm, and then I took those features and I used it to like some regression analysis, and that was the introduction. And, so I never really had formal training in NLP or anything. And then I kind of finished my honors I was like, what do I do next? I wasn't really sure. And then I spoke to Philippe Brink, who became my supervisor for my master's. He said he'll be my supervisor, but I have to do it in maths, applied maths, and I got to do it at NLP. And during my master's, I actually did, I worked with Precog. So so there's this WhatsApp, like a WhatsApp SMS service for mothers that are pregnant and breastfeeding called Mom Connect, and that's run by the Department of Health in collaboration with Precog. So they do the digital support. So I petitioned the Department of Health to allow us to work with them and use their data to see if we can automate or semi-automate the process of answering these questions. Because being a department, they were under a lot of strain, so messages took 20 hours on average to be responded to. And that was my master's thesis, and that really kind of pushed me towards becoming a full-fledged NLP researcher. I got to publish at ACL on the work I did, and from there I did more internships in data science. I was looking for a role in NLP specifically, but it was very hard to find one in South Africa. And now I finally found my place. So I'm doing NLP on speech. I'm doing speech to text, and then also doing summarization and stuff. So that's where I'm now.
Sorry, I just quickly want to jump in here. I just want to check, is anyone else having trouble with Jeannie's sound? It seems to break up a little bit. I don't know if it's just on my end. I just want to be sure that it...
It's definitely better when you lean closer to the mic, Jeannie.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay.
We're going to figure this out as we go along.
Cool.
Fantastic. Okay, Kalia, how about you?
So I think it was in my 4th year of university. We had a machine learning course, and I learned about genetic algorithms and these almost like chromosomes that can learn to do things. And yeah, it was very interesting. I think we built some sort of stock predictor thing. It didn't work too well, but I was pretty shocked that you could sort of create a thing that could make a decision, and I was pretty impressed. But I think at that time, from my perspective, it was something cool to do. It was not something that I'd known there were a lot of jobs available. So after that, I think I spent a couple of years in software, but then I really sort of missed the whole maths and the stats and the kind of formal thinking that came with machine learning. And then from that, I decided to actually, there was that, and then also attended the first Indaba, and I was like, wow, this is really cool, and people are doing really interesting stuff. And that sort of inspired me to do a shift from a more software engineering career into a machine learning career. Yeah, that's me.
Fantastic. Cool. Yeah, sounds like everyone's had really exciting journeys coming up to this point. So not to be a complete downer on that excitement, but I thought it might be fruitful to discuss some of the challenges or frustrations that you've encountered for machine learning in industry. Jeannie, would you like to kick this one off?
Sure. So I think my biggest frustration in the machine learning community, or just in industry in general, is there's a lot of breadth, but not a lot of depth. So you especially when people start with their data science journey, they do like a short course or something, and then they enter the job. But there's so much more depth that you need to have to actually facilitate machine learning in industry. So I think that's one of my big frustrations. And then also, I think managers that don't have technical experience, I think that's my other pet peeve. Yeah.
Lydia, how's your experience been?
Well, now I can hear myself.
You sound very clear on our end.
It's very confusing. Maybe someone else can go quickly and I can just...
Okay. Senor, would you like to go?
Oh, sorry.
Kaliab, no, go for it. Go for it.
No, I just wanted to agree with Ginny. Yeah, I think there's a lot of buzzwords being thrown around, and sometimes machine learning can sort of be a buzzword for certain companies. And if you don't have the right sort of leadership who actually understand what machine learning is, then you end up doing things that like either aren't possible or maybe things that aren't useful, like just to sort of say you've done machine learning. So yeah, I'd say the big frustration is you need to have correct leadership that actually understands machine learning. And I would say probably like a second point from my perspective is you need to maybe align your personal goals with the company's goals. So sometimes, like let's say if you're working for a startup and the startup wants to build a product, but maybe you want to focus on research, that can be frustrating, or maybe vice versa. So I think it's really important to sort of align your personal goals with the company's goals. And if that's not aligned, it can be a bit frustrating when practicing machine learning in industry.
Great. Senor, would you like to go next?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, just like echoing what's been said, I think yeah, it is very important for like leadership to have a good insight into what machine learning takes and what goes into it. I think from just from things I've observed from and talking to people, I think the mismatch often comes in with kind of like treating machine learning as software engineering. And so you put these like arbitrary deadlines on your machine learning efforts, but like you can't actually say with certainty that we'll get like 89% accuracy in 3 weeks. Like it's impossible. It's a research endeavor in essence. And so yeah, I fully agree with that. And then just from our side, like looking at it from a sort of like software engineering perspective, I think one of the hardest things is testing and monitoring machine learning models. So it's just very like it's just non-trivial to test and to kind of like keep updating it as it goes along and ensuring that as you get like concept drift that your models keep updating, and having all of that infrastructure and just being able to have insight into what your model's doing, or kind of like making it robust to arbitrary inputs, especially for like sort of like client facing and anything can happen. In those cases, it's really tough. And then like not my experience, but from other people I've just spoken to, like if you're dealing with industries that aren't very protective over how they store and keep data, like you can have SQL tables in one place and no SQL in the other. And if you're doing a consulting job and trying to get all those databases to play with each other, it's an absolute nightmare from what I've heard from people. So there's just a lot of stuff around just like data quality and ensuring your models do well that is just so frustrating.
Yeah, it sounds like data privacy also raises a question mark there. And I think that ties into what Kaliab said about becoming a buzzword. But we'll definitely touch on the ethics in the second section. I saw you nodding quite a bit, Lydia. That seems to echo your experience.
I can still hear it, but I think I'm going to live with it because it sounds much better. Yeah. I also spoke to some people from our... Sorry, I can hear myself. I'm just going to talk like this. I spoke to some people from our from work, and we have two very different clients. The one client is very corporate and very controlling, and the other allows us to serve them, if that makes sense. So we make the choices, and it's amazing how different it is. We have two teams, and the one team is frustrated the whole time, and the other team is moving in leaps and bounds. So I would say the one challenge that I've seen here is that the corporate structure can be very difficult, especially for us. We're actually creative types, if you want to say that. And it's difficult to be controlled like that. And then the other challenge for me personally was moving from academics to the working world. I had to learn to not research the way I was used to. I was used to
taking a topic and unpacking it completely, reading up a lot about it, articles and so on. And now that's a skill that's not that I shouldn't be doing. I should actually be rapidly developing things, find the best solution as quickly as possible. As soon as you find a pretty good solution, you should move on, because then you might reach to a point of diminishing returns. So that was a challenge to me.
Yeah, I quite like that point you just made, because I think that's something I struggle with as well. I want to understand like the entire scope of the problem, and I want the perfect solution before I've been like written a line of code, and then it's just like, this isn't how it's supposed to be. So yeah, very interesting points that were raised by everyone. I think that is a good segue into the next question, which is about developing your toolkit. So if you were to start with a blank page, what 3 skills would you cherry pick for your work? And yeah, additionally, how would you rate the importance of your personal developments? So mentorship, EQ, etc. So you can take that framework, answer as you'd like. I'm going to ask Kaliab to kick this one off.
Okay. So to answer the first question about what 3 skills, I think number 1, you need sort of analytical skills, and that's a variety of like probability, math, stats skills. And I think you need to understand a lot of those concepts at a foundational level, and I think that's really important. Number 2, I think obviously you need programming skills, because you're going to code up a lot of implementations, and that's important. Number 3, I would say is maybe something that's not focused on, but I think it's important, is I think writing skills. So like this can vary from writing blogs or writing papers, or just essentially even writing small medium articles. Like I think that it's very important to be able to write, because you need to be able to communicate your ideas, whether it's like to the community, or whether it's to a client, or whether it's to like a research paper submission. I think writing is important. So I think having those 3 skills is pretty foundational and important. And sorry, what is the second question, Siobhan?
It was just in your development, how would you rate something that's maybe not so technical? So, for example, the role of mentorship or EQ.
Okay.
Emotional intelligence. Yes.
Yeah, I would say it's very important. I think EQ is an important part of basically any career. And the reason why it's very important is I think this is probably a thing that a lot of people don't say, but a big part of a lot of people's career is luck. And like having more EQ and forming relationships with more people, and being able to handle just interacting and working with different people will probably bring more opportunities to you, and also just make working with you and other people like work better. So I think EQ is very important, because this isn't something people do alone. So I think you'll always be working with people, and it's very important to have emotional intelligence when doing that.
Great. Jeannie, do you have perhaps any different skills that you'd like to add to Kaliab's list?
No, I think I think my list is like completely the same. The only thing I would add is in terms of communication, I would add like verbal communication as well. I think the ability not just to write, but also to be able to present your findings, storytelling, communicating your ideas. You know, like ideas an orphan without like proper communication. So, yeah.
And the role of mentoring, or the less technical side of things.
Yeah, so I think I would rate that like number 1 actually. More than anything, there's an upper limit to where your career can go if you don't have a high EQ, unfortunately, and if you don't actively work on developing your self-awareness and your leadership skills and your communication skills, like you're missing out. And I think like for me personally, I got introduced to my mentor like quite early, and he taught me so much about like, you know, just like navigating my career, introducing me to the right people, and I think like everyone should reach out to someone that they could potentially be mentored by, and everyone should also, like once they reach a certain level of maturity, also provide mentorship
Thank you. I'm just reminded to please lean closer to your mic. But I think
Sorry.
we did catch what you were saying.
Okay.
I would just like to use this opportunity to do a plug of the Deep Learning Indaba's mentorship program, which is open to all members of the African community. I will share the link now. While I do that, Senor, do you have anything to add or anything you'd like to comment on?
Yeah, so I mean, like, of course, agree with everything everyone said so far, especially like focusing on foundational skills. I think one thing for me that I would have probably tried to do better is really take time to like think about how to analyze my solutions and like in kind of like a 360 full kind of way, because yeah, initially it was kind of just like, oh, I trained this model and it got like 86% accuracy and I'm so great, and like, well, and then like you go and work in industry and then you have like all of these edge cases and you have failure modes and you have to be robust to certain types of inputs and not others. And so yeah, one skill I would just kind of like focus on is kind of like just being better at being analytical when you evaluating your solutions. That's one thing that I've probably grown the most in since I've started working. And so, yeah, that's obviously important. And then on the mentoring and EQ side, like, of course, super important. Lots have been said about having emotional intelligence. I think from the mentorship side, yeah, like I guess in all kind of like creative industries, probably almost any industry, one thing that we all benefit from is like diversity of thought in terms of problems, like solving problems. So every time, for instance, like we've got a new data scientist in who's had a completely different sort of like background and come in with fresh ideas, like the way that our team sort of like thinking has developed over time has been amazing. And so like having mentors that can do that for you and also just connect you with the right people, I think it's just super valuable for our industry. Yeah.
Fantastic. Lydia, how about you?
Cool. I agree with everything, obviously. Sounding like a broken record. To me, something that I would like to add is, well, let me first start with mentoring. I was lucky enough to join my company a week before lockdown started. So all of my mentoring was online, and there's something to be said for working in the office now. I'm in the office right now. That it's so much better to talk to people in person when you've just started working. That's something I would, even if it's, this is more than just mentoring, it's surrounding yourself with people with ideas. And people, it's osmosis. And then mentoring specifically, I was very lucky to have two of our top engineers, our CTO, guiding me for a year of really internet. So very blessed to be exposed to people like that. So mentoring, we all agree, is important. And then to talk about skills, I just started working a year ago after my master's. So I'm still fresh, and I think the skills that I've learned are fresh in my mind. The first is communication, like you said, being able to talk to the client, understanding what they want, and translating that to what should be built, not just building whatever you feel like. And then the other big skill that I've learned from my mentors is to take a problem and boil it down to the simplest solution. Because it's very, very easy to squirrel out of control. It's happened to me so many times now where I have this problem, but that has to happen. And this thing has to communicate with that, but I can't work on that. It's a lot. So to isolate these problems and work with them individually. So mock out almost all of the rest of the problems, deal with this problem, then move on to the next one, and finally bring everything together. That was a very good skill.
Thanks. Yeah, this was a very thorough overview. I think we touched on a lot of corners. I also liked what she said about, like, yeah, I think it's unfortunate side effect of the pandemic, but as nice as work from home can be, I think I've learned that there's a finite number of ideas in my head. And if there's no one to just quickly bounce something off, it can become such a blocker. So, and then of course, having in-person conversations with mentors just accelerates progress. So on this topic of learning and advancing yourselves, I'm quite curious about how you strike a balance between keeping up with the latest tech, but also not jumping on every bandwagon. So essentially, how do you manage to not be overwhelmed by the daily advances being made in the field, but still contribute to those advances? And Lydia, I'd like to ask you to take this one.
Cool. Well, to me, I do the application of machine learning. So the new advances that we see are advances that we use. It's not necessarily advances that we develop. And to implement these, this new work that's come out recently is very tempting. But we have a process at Spatial Edge, and I'm sure it's a process at a lot of places. Actually, it's Toyota's principle. I wrote it down somewhere. Oh yes, consider and consensus over a long time, and then make a decision, and only then start developing. So that's to summarize rather. We have spent time reading up about all of the newest technology, and before we decide to implement anything, we compare all of the options. And then once we have decided on a certain technique, if it's going to help us in our specific stack, then we implement it. And when we decide to implement something, we develop it rapidly. So implement it, get it out of the way, start with the next thing.
I saw you nodding, Kalia. Does your process differ at all?
No. Well, okay, I would say somewhat. I'm just trying to see how I describe this. I think a real important thing is that you need to sort of leverage your community. I think it's difficult as a person to individually keep up with what's happening in the field. There's new papers, there's new blog posts, there's new frameworks every day. So I think the easiest way for me is to, I guess, either on Twitter or on Slack channels. Essentially what happens is you hear about new things, and if like an idea persists after a while, then maybe that's something interesting you should have a look at. So I think it's important to leverage your community, and that's probably, I think, the only way you can keep sane and keep up with everything that's happening with the new advances.
So we're back to the idea of this being a massive team effort. We're all in this together.
Yes. Yes, definitely.
Senor, how about yourself?
Yeah, so similarly, I also use Twitter quite a bit. Like, if it reaches my Twitter, then I know that like there's been a lot of consideration on this thing and it's worth checking out. So that's kind of like how I filter through it. But yeah, one for me is kind of like lazy, I call it lazy learning or on-demand learning, where until like I might know about it and like keep an eye on what's going on, but until like I actually need to use it or like I'm curious enough and want to implement it, I won't really like spend the time reading through all the papers and whatever, because you're just never going to keep up. Like I'm not going to read things peripheral to what I'm doing while I'm not going to be like using it in any capacity. And so yeah, and so I kind of like that's one strategy. And then the other, just in terms of like industry itself, is that like so obviously research moves quite quickly and there's a lot of papers coming out, but like in industry, you can technically say we move slower in the sense that there's a lot more considerations when you want to put something into production. So a paper might come out, you know, state of the art in whatever, and you want to use it. And then if you want to implement it, now you got to think about like how you're going to get it in, what architecture, how you're going to support it, you need to retrain it, and all this other jazz that is around, because it's a system now, it's not just the model itself. And you don't know if it's going to work for your domain or be like as the performance will improve as much on your own domain. So there's only, you know, it's a cost benefit analysis, and sometimes you just got to kind of like, like as Lydia was saying, like really think about it and consider if it's worth it, and then go from there. Yeah. So, also that.
Jeannie, is there anything different in your approach? Oh.
No, I really like your Senor. I really like your way of describing it as like. I totally agree. Sorry.
Yes, we can hear you. We can't see you, but we can hear you.
Okay, I'll just continue. So I think for me, like a lot of you mentioned, like you should probably let an idea test the waters first, and if it withstands the test of time, and people are still using it 6 months later or something, then it wasn't just a fad. Then it's like it's probably something important. But I also agree that you shouldn't have to know every single thing that's happening. Because then you're watering down your focus area. It's better to focus on one or two things that you really understand really well, and you can add value to using that. So for me, like the best way for me to stay up to date is just to read like a few people's email lists, like Sebastian Ruder. I love his email list. Is that it?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
I might even have a link that I can share, which I'll look for just now.
Yeah, that's
I'd also recommend that
great,
one.
Great resource for NLP, for staying up to date.
Yeah, I also like his mailing list because I'm so far removed from NLP, but it's nice to just kind of, like from a spectator point of view, really great mailing list. Great. I'm going to round back to one of our earlier questions. We have a question from an audience member, Akana. The question is, how do you navigate the challenges in industry with lack of good quality data and well thought out business objectives? And this is all on top of tight deadlines. Senor, would you like to kick this one off?
Yeah, sure. So I think this comes back to what we said earlier about like leadership and them having kind of like the right mental framework for how machine learning works in production. Because data, I think everyone will always complain about data quality and data issues. And at the end of the day, it is a challenge, especially in industries or with the company, let's say, that hasn't got like a good data management strategy. And so, I think like it comes down to setting the right expectations and kind of like upfront knowing what you're dealing with, what the state of the data is before you go down this journey, and then setting expectations so that everyone's kind of aligned on what that's going to look like. And I think if that goes wrong, then you're going to be under crazy pressure and dealing with deadlines that don't make sense given the state of the data and what you're dealing with. So I think it comes down to sort of like finding out the right state of things, setting the right expectations, and then going from there. I wouldn't say that there's too much in terms of like magic that can happen there. Yeah.
Cool. Lydia, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, this just made me think about something we might talk about a little bit later, that the data is becoming extremely valuable. One day when machine learning is just a click of the button and it's, what do they say, democratized, data will be the most important thing. Data will be super valuable. There's a lot to unpack about that, but data and spatial edge at our company, it's super important that the data gets managed properly. So in our case, our clients have tons of data. We're working with big data. We're working with data in a Google Cloud platform because the data warehouse would be too small to hold all of our clients' data. So I think it's in a different environment than what you were mentioning, Senor. But we have people who their whole job is to make sure that the ingestion's complete on time and that the data is reliable and there are backups of backups. And it's not my field, but I know that it's extremely important. I can just give a view of big data in that way.
Jeannie, what's your perspective on this topic?
Sorry, could you just repeat the question, please? Sorry.
Yes, of course.
I was just scrolling through all the questions that was on the chat.
No problem. So the question is, how do you navigate the challenges in industry with lack of good quality data and well thought out business objectives when you have tight deadlines?
Yeah, so in my experience, that is actually a corporate issue, and it stems from poor management, poor directives, and a lack of a coherent data strategy. So if you have bad data and you don't have proper business objectives, what are you doing? That doesn't align. So yeah, you need to actually go back to your first principles and understand what are you trying to do, because without good data, you're not going to achieve much.
Caleb, is there anything different in your experience?
Yeah, I think the only small thing I would add, yeah, like I agree with what everyone said. I think it's great points. I definitely want to reiterate the setting expectations so that people know what to expect. But I think another important thing is that, yes, you have the data, but I think what a lot of people don't do sometimes is maybe actually check the data. Like, is this data actually true? Because if you use the data, you assume the data is the truth. And the problem is sometimes the data is wrong, and it could be because the person who inputted the data could be wrong. It could be because of the way the data was sampled. Like maybe the person collecting the data didn't sample it from everywhere where they want the data to be representative of. So I just think it's important to not just trust the data and actually just think about who creates the data and maybe try and understand from that person's perspective. And then from there, you can start thinking about what to do with the data.
Fantastic. Okay, so we're going to round out the first section now with a question about imposter syndrome. And I'm basically going to ask if you found the magic secrets to managing imposter syndrome. And if you haven't, maybe just general thoughts on the topic. Jeannie, would you like to go first? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry. I think everyone at some stage in their career will suffer from imposter syndrome. Just being asked to join this panel had me suffer from imposter syndrome, because I was like, I don't even know what value I can add to this conversation. But then I had to go and remind myself, I've done a lot of internships. I can add value. Like you need to kind of, yeah, you need to back yourself and maybe have a few coping mechanisms to remind yourself. So something I do sometimes is I'll just take my CV out and I'll read through my CV again. Just remind myself like where I've come, how far I've come, and what I've done so far. And I think like making that list of things, what you've achieved. And no, it sounds maybe a bit like self promoting, or not self promoting, but I don't know what the word is. But you need to remind yourself what you've achieved. You can't be like my words are fading into night, but you can't bash yourself. You need to back yourself. So yeah.
I think that's a great mantra. Back yourself. Senor, what's your take on this?
So, finally, for me, like I have very weird like coping ways of, well, not ways of coping with it, but like I have weird ways of coping with things. And one of them for me is that like everybody has imposter syndrome. Like we're all in this together. So I'm kind of like, well, I have it, you have it. So like I'm just gonna forget about it and continue with my day. And like it's crazy because sometimes I'll be like, I think like I'll always say like your heroes have imposter syndrome. So like 3 steps away from you, like the whole chain has imposter syndrome. And for me, I'm like, well, if we're all dealing with it, like, I might as well just get over myself and kind of keep going. For some people that won't work because you're like, well, if your hero's hero has imposter syndrome, then like I probably have crazy imposter syndrome. But for me, it's a combination. So that's why I call it weird. But yeah, I think like if we're all dealing with it together, and like I'm gonna have imposter syndrome because the people on the panel, and the people on the panel are gonna have imposter syndrome because I'm here as well. It's just like it's one of those things. So I think like you just kind of get used to it over time, at least.
Lydia, how about you?
Okay. For me, obviously we all have imposter syndrome, like we said, and I found that I keep on hearing myself, sorry. Okay, so you have to trust in how far you've come, like Jeannie said, and that's easy enough to see, but you also have to trust in the work that you're doing now and the effect that's going to have in 10 years, 5 years, whatever. So I think what I find solace in is the little bit of effort I'm putting in today, and I know that it's not going to waste. And 10 years from now, I will look back and say, I'm glad that I read up on that, or I'm glad that I asked a stupid question. That's something I've found, and the way you said, Senor, that you don't, you deal with it in weird ways. That's something that I've decided I will be. I will be someone who asks a stupid question, because then hopefully I'll learn something from it. And that's something I have to challenge myself with. I don't want to look stupid, but you have to make mistakes in order to learn. If you're trying to learn without making mistakes, you're blocking yourself. That's what I would say about it. And the one other thing that I wanted to mention is that people want you to succeed. If you're in a healthy environment, the people around you want to help pull you up. You just have to put in the effort. Yeah, so remember that we're in a kind world.
Yeah, there's the team effort. Again, we're all in this together, and yeah, it's got to take the chance, put yourself out there. It's really rewarding. Kaliab, what's your take?
My take on it is that imposter syndrome can be, I would say, a healthy imposter syndrome can actually be a good thing, where it just sort of reminds you that you're in a place where either you're challenged or you're in a place where you can learn from the people around you. I actually think if you maybe don't feel any imposter syndrome, okay, it obviously could mean you have a healthy self-esteem, but it could also mean that maybe you aren't challenged. Like maybe you don't feel like you could learn a lot from the people around you. So I think it's important to have a look at it from perspective, okay, I am challenging myself, and that is a positive, and maybe look at it from that perspective.
Yeah, just one comment I'll add is I think this pandemic robbed me a bit of imposter syndrome, because I haven't been surrounded by people. It hasn't been as obvious, and then I've also noticed that I've been like getting very comfortable, and then I'm like, great, there's a healthy level of imposter syndrome that I need to feed off to keep progressing, because otherwise I'm just going to coast at this level.
Definitely.
Fantastic. That was a great first round. We're now going to move into the second round, which focuses more on the latest developments in tech, but also the ethics around that. So I would just open-ended question, what are you most excited about at the moment? In any field, any topic, any technology. Kaliab, would you like to kick us off?
Sure. Yeah, I'm a bit biased on this question, but I'm pretty excited about multi-agent reinforcement learning. That's what my team at InstaDeep is working on. I think that, like, for a long time, machine learning has been focused on like making a prediction, but I think going forward in the future, It's going to be about actually having groups of agents making predictions together, communicating, and taking actions in specific environments. So I think going forward, I'm really excited about what's going to happen. I'm really excited with having things that can communicate and make decisions together. And yeah, I think that'll be a very exciting future going forward.
Fantastic. Yeah, multi-agent reinforcement learning has been gaining a lot of traction. It's been coming up on my Twitter feed a lot, so it's definitely here to stay.
Yeah.
Jeannie, what are your thoughts on this?
I think from an industry perspective, I think what's really exciting is a lot of the rise of like ML as a service. So a lot of companies are focusing their development on building tools that they can then lease out through APIs. So that's part of what I'm doing at our company. But I think just in general, that's like a really nice way to see ML in practice. And I think the other thing that I'm quite excited about just in the NLP space is that more and more focus is being given to underrepresented and low resource languages. So just a shout out to Masakhane, you guys are great. Yeah, I think that's the thing that makes me excited right now.
Senor, what about you?
Yeah, so from my side, I think like I know very little about NLP, but I think that just like over the last probably like 2 years, there's been like a crazy amount of good research coming out, and I'm just really excited to see like where it ends up and like what we have maybe, I don't know, a few years from now, 10 years from now, and like how far conversational AIs are and that kind of stuff. So that for me is something I'm just like extremely curious and interested in. And then just from like at least based on the work I've done before, a lot around semi-supervised and unsupervised learning. So there's been a lot of like good research there, especially with semi-supervised learning, and that's great because obviously you need less data to be able to make or build any products that you want. And so there's a lot of that happening in the computer vision space, and I'm just like really excited about that. I think like a year or two ago, I saw a paper on like unsupervised semantic segmentation, and it kind of just like blew my mind. And yeah, just more work going there, and yeah, that for me is just really exciting. So, cool.
How about you, Lydia?
To me, it's what I already mentioned, machine learning at the push of a button. I think it's, I don't want to say closer than we think it is, but it probably is. The way the internet just all of a sudden became such a big part of our lives, I think machine learning is going to become a big part of our lives as well. And that's pretty awesome. It's the step after the Internet of Things almost, where you can democratize AI, like I mentioned before, and use it on your cell phone for your own ideas. So let's say I want to be able to identify what type of plant this is, and somehow that's just accessible to me. So I can write an algorithm that does that with the press of a button. I'm very excited about something like that in the future.
Great. So I think this is a good segue into our next question, which is around the ethical considerations and at what level law enforcement should be handling these kind of things, and how do we push forward with all this progress, making sure that global policy stays in line, or is it maybe not? I don't know. I think I'd like to keep this question open-ended about the progress and just keeping up in terms of ethics and policy. Lydia, I'm gonna, since you rounded us off so nicely, I'm gonna ask you to start this one.
Cool. So one thing that I wanted to mention was that there is now an act. We're talking about data security before, or we were actually not talking about data security. I'm talking about data security now. That there's the PR that's coming in 2 months' time, which is the policy in South Africa to protect the data of people. So companies are now required by law to not even allow data scientists without proper clearance to have access to your personal information. And this wasn't a thing before. How crazy is that? That people at a call center know everything about you. It's not right. So I'm very happy that a policy like that has been set into place. And then I just wanted to mention policies about machine learning and AI specifically in the future, because the big question is, how do we stop someone from using facial recognition or to do something evil? Or how do we stop someone from controlling your robot arm? I don't know. Or Neuralink, how do you stop someone from hacking into Neuralink? And I think I've listened to a podcast, and I don't remember the woman's name now, but she mentioned that it's going to have to, the policy makers are a lot slower than the people who actually create AI, because it's so easy for us now. Anyone can do it. So we have to control, as consumers of this some type of machine learning service, you have to set your standards of what you would like to use. So yeah, I don't have a good example, but the other suggestion that she made was that the people, the policy could be that the people who invent these algorithms have to almost write a document of or assess what the negative impact of their product could be, and they have to be conscious already at inception of what this effect this could have on the world.
Yeah, with progress being just like exponential, I suppose, yeah, we all need to be self-policing here, just, yeah, so we can all do this responsibly. Because, yeah, I think, like you said, things are just moving too slowly. To only have a data policy act coming out in 2 months is like eons too late. But I think that's a common theme for most of Africa, unfortunately. Jeannie, I'm going to ask you to give your thoughts next.
Yeah, I think to add to what Lydia said is, I think very important is that there needs to be clarity on, where the responsibility and the liability of machine learning models that gets put into production and gets leased out to smaller companies and stuff. There needs to be like more clarity on where the responsibility and the liability lies. So for example, if a tool gets used and someone dies, like where does the responsibility lies? Is it the data scientist? Is it the person that signed off on this model? So yeah, like similar to any product that gets put out onto the market, there needs to be some more rigorous testing. Like if a food product gets put out, it has to prove that it's not like dangerous. If a medical product gets put out, they have to go through years of testing to prove that it's not doesn't cause any long-term damage. But we're not seeing any of that oversight with the machine learning models or tools, like even tools that just get put in the hand of the users, and the users don't necessarily understand. The end user doesn't necessarily understand the biases that are contained in these models.
Kaliab, what are your thoughts?
Personally, I would hope that there would be like a boom in ethics research. I feel like there's been a boom in NLP quite recently, but I feel like a lot of ethics research is quite neglected. And I think the problem with that is the people making a lot of these advances like come from a certain small part of the world that isn't representative of the whole world. So it's quite difficult to know if these people make considerations for the whole world in general. So like my hope would be that there'd be more funding support for ethics research, and then it would hopefully catch up to the actual like applied and designing of the frameworks, and that eventually hopefully it'll reach a stage where those two kind of work together in unison, and that we can actually use this technology so that it's the betterment of everyone, the betterment of majority of people as opposed to maybe the top 5% or top 1%. So yeah, I would hope to see a boom in ethics research.
Senor, do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, I think just echoing that, I totally agree. I think like it's good that there has been some momentum there, that there is a lot more chatter or dialogue about ethics research up till now. And I think from my side, it kind of has to go. Kind of like the ethical research has to inform the policy, and hopefully we can get better at implementing policy at a faster rate. Obviously, that's wishful thinking to some degree. But the one thing is like you don't really want to leave it in the hands of a company to toe the line. Like profit incentives will most likely outweigh any ethical concerns they have, or they'll put it out and catch up with the ethical concerns at a later time and take their penalties or take the backlash. And so, yeah, I think like just again like a boom in ethical research, and then just like a real push to kind of get that to inform policy, and then that will kind of like regulate the industry in the only way that like I feel like we could trust it, or trust the company to adhere. Like right now they'll tell you that we don't use your data, for instance, or they don't keep track of anything. And how do you know? Like how do you know that they don't keep up with it? But if there's legislation there, they can get sued or like huge penalties for that. And there's checks every now and again. Like you're at least more like faithful, or like you believe at least that they'll be more faithful in adhering to this policy. So I think legislation has to be an important part of that conversation.
Fantastic. Thank you for the very thorough overview, everyone. So, very important question. I don't think it gets asked often enough, and I'm sure we could keep going on for the rest of the evening. But I'm going to stick to a similar vein, and the next question is from an audience member, Emil, who's asked that industrial AI has quite a lot of flack due to bad infrastructure. Is the only way to start from scratch, or can existing infrastructure be updated? And let's go with Senor this time around.
Sorry, can you just repeat the question again?
Of course. Industrial AI has quite a lot of flack due to bad infrastructure. Is the only way to start from scratch, or can existing infrastructure be updated?
I'm assuming this means technical infrastructure. So in that case, I think that comes down to like companies kind of like goals, I guess. There's a lot of problems with infrastructure for machine learning, but at the end of the day, it depends on like where you are at in your cycle of development and what your concerns are. Like the speed is the most important thing. Like can you deal with those infrastructure problems? Otherwise, you can take the time to kind of do it yourself. But at the end of the day, like I think we tend to forget how early machine learning is in its development, and we're just going through like a lot of teething issues, and this is like a sign of us maturing. So we have like proliferation of tools for doing almost everything, and we haven't really like settled on a workflow that makes sense for like the average use case in the same way that kind of like software engineering is converged on a set of common tools and principles. And so I think we're just dealing with the newness of our industry, and so it sucks, but I think we'll get there over time. Cool.
Jeannie, how about
so I think based on my experience, Emil said the two options are either to start from scratch or redesign the entire infrastructure, right? So sometimes the infrastructure of the tech goes hand in hand with the corporate structure and the corporate alignment and stuff. So I don't think that companies can shift towards digital first without overhaul of employees' attitude towards digital. So I think that speaks to digital transformation within corporates. And yeah, I think in my experience, I have actually been on a consulting job where this was the primary focus of the company, was to migrate their data into the cloud and unify all their data silos. And it was actually an absolute, like, pardon my language, issue, because there was different systems built from different eras with different management teams with different languages. Some were written in Cobalt and some were written in Fortran, and the people that wrote these systems don't exist anymore. So at some point you need to be like, okay, we're scratching this, we're starting from scratch, but that also means, like, retraining your people. Some jobs will be made redundant because now you have a database manager or administrator that has no role anymore. They've been managing this database for the past 30 years, and now they're effectively being retired. So it's quite a complex situation, and you need to, like, it also depends on the organization. Some organizations can move very agile, some can't. And then you need to relook at your organizational structure as well, I think.
Lydia. Oh, actually, just shout out to Fortran. That's the second time it's come up in conversation on my end in a week. So I wonder if that's going to pick up in trends.
I doubt it.
Yeah, my dad has some great stories about ESCOM in the old days with Fortran. Lydia, sorry to interrupt. Please continue.
No, not at all. I don't have much to add. I think I'm blessed in that I was exposed to good infrastructure. So there's hope. We're using Google Cloud Platform as our, it's very similar to AWS. I've seen that AWS is used more often, but Google Cloud Platform, the tools that Google developed, they have now, for example, the tool to their recommendation systems for their Google ads. The tools that they developed to create that ad system is now available to everyone if you use GCP. So that machine learning as a service that Jeannie mentioned, in exactly the same way, their infrastructure is made available to you as a service. And I think that's amazing that they made that possible for us. And it's the same for AWS. I think to add on to what you said about accelerating your self-driven learning, to learn how Google set up their infrastructure and why they made the choices that they made, you could do some courses on that. And I think it'll give you a very good idea of how to tackle your problems in a well thought out way.
Kaliab.
I definitely feel Jeannie's pain. I've also worked in certain projects having to work with all the infrastructure, and it is really painful. It is very, very painful. I think the only thing I can add is maybe, like, I think people who are interested in the new technology would obviously prefer to start from scratch, but you need to be pragmatic about it. So you're not going to be able to change the whole infrastructure in a day or in a week or even in a few years. So maybe you need to take smaller goals to improve certain parts of the infrastructure and be pragmatic. And then if people can see, okay, wow, this small change actually helped us, then maybe people are more willing to improve the infrastructure. So I would say just be pragmatic about improvements to the infrastructure.
Fantastic. I'm going to move into our third section where we look to the future. And I think this time I'm not going to start on the high. I'm going to start with the serious question, which is from Darby. Shout out to Darby. Huge supporter of Nerve. We wouldn't be here without him. And so Darby's question is, are any of the panelists worried about the future of AI and where it can potentially lead? So he specifically mentioned the whole singularity issue and all. Is this a concern, and what can be done to control it? So I'm going to leave it at that. But if you'd like to address ethics again, I think that's also pertinent. But please feel free to take the question where you'd like. And so I'm going to ask Jeannie to start us off.
Yeah, so in my experience, like we are so far away from like general intelligence. I'm still working with pre-trained models that have been trained on so much data, and then it doesn't recognize one word out of vocabulary, and then it fails. And then I'm like, well, you're not that intelligent, are you? Like, I think the research will have to not just take an incremental approach, but take like leaps and bounds forward before we reach a point where we reach some form of singularity. I think our biggest concern right now is bias and potential harm that machine learning models can do.
Thanks. Senor, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with Jeannie completely. I feel like the more you like do or play around with AI, like the less scared you become, if I can put it that way. Really, because it just seems, one, it feels like maths, like after a while, and then two, it does dumb stuff all the time. So there's that. But I think, like, I guess in the long, like, okay, so right now, like, not at all. Like, I don't have any real concern. But I think it's just because, like, the warning signs are like so far away, at least in my opinion. But maybe at that time you could ask me again, and I might be concerned then. But I also just want to reiterate what Jeannie said about fairness and bias. I think that is a huge concern, and could probably have way more negative effects, like in the next decade, than any sentient AI could right now, or the concern of one right now. So that's kind of like how I feel about it as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. Also, what you said just reminded me of the book Super Intelligence, which I'm not sure if anyone else has read, but I'd highly recommend. It's very forward thinking, and it covers a wide range in this area. But we're not here to hear about other people's work. We're here to hear about yours. So next up, Lydia.
Cool. So I'm going to quote that. It wasn't a podcast, it was a TED Talk. I'm going to paraphrase what the woman said. I'm sorry that I don't remember her name. But she said to predict kind of what can happen with AI, we have to look back and see what's happened in the past. And for example, once again, the internet has been amazing. It's opened up so many. It's a whole new world we live in now. We don't live without the internet anymore, and that will be machine learning. But the internet has also exposed us to a lot of bad things. So we can get hacked, our information can get stolen. There's a lot more. I want to say our privacy is taken away from us in many ways, and I think we have to remember that can happen with machine learning as well. So I don't have the answer for how we can put policies in place and how we're supposed to work with this, but I know that we have to take into consideration humans and culture, and we have to take into consideration the effect on the environment, and then also just how technology will influence that.
Yeah, I guess a lot of this boils down to just thinking about what things could be before they even happen. It goes back to like the ethics policies and stuff. Like change just is not fast enough. So forward thinking is key. Yeah. Another book plug is Future Crimes, which I think touches on a couple of the points you made about like how we can get hacked, and like the closer we get to becoming cyborgs as we merge with technology, the potentials are just it's kind of scary actually. Kaliab.
Ooh.
Sorry.
Sorry, can go
Did you want to say something, Jeannie? Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, sorry. I just wanted to add another book that I really found really opened my eyes is Black Swan. So Black Swan talks about like, you know, just the unknowable unknowns. So we don't even know like how bad ML can have effects. So like kind of like hedging your bets on that. So that's also a book I would really recommend to people.
Thank you. That's on my list now. Kayab.
Yeah, so to answer, I guess, the first question about the singularity, no, not concerned. Yeah, I think like AI in its current form is very narrow. It's really not, I think, something we need to worry about for quite a long time. And I think we'll probably be warned with we'll probably need a few exponential breakthroughs before we get to anything close. So yeah, I don't think that's a concern. In terms of what can be done, again, I think like thinking about the ethics and reading ethics work and promoting ethics work is important, because a lot of the times AI is used to make decisions, and decisions are usually applied from people in power to people not in power. So like I would plug a documentary on Netflix called Coded Bias, and they sort of give examples of how AI is used to make decisions about, let's say, the lower income people in society. So I think a way to sort of hopefully make AI more equitable for everyone is to put more focus on the ethics research, and hopefully that leads to policy, like Senor said, and then that leads to AI being used in like a fairer context for everyone.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. We're going to have one more question, and then we'll wrap up. But I'm, again, open-ended, any field, but what are you most excited to see in the next 5 years? And I'm also curious if you think this is more likely to come out of industry or the private sector or academia. And Kaliab, I'm going to ask you to go first.
Okay, most exciting next 5 years. I would say there's various things. Again, I'm probably reiterating what I said. I think multi-agent reinforcement learning is going to be very interesting, and seeing how systems can cooperate to make decisions. I think also, I think this has been mentioned, but having AI as a service is going to be interesting. So like things like Hugging Face, where people can actually use AI in an accessible way. I think that'll be influential. In terms of, is it likely to come from private or academic? I think it'll be both. I think that in academia, you have a lot of freedom to come up with interesting ideas. So I think maybe interesting ideas usually start out in academia. But I think that in the private sector, we usually have like a focus, and you actually try and like apply something or try and solve a problem, is where you can really either scale up something or try and actually apply it to the real world, where things get really difficult and really tricky. So yeah, I would say it's probably going to come out of the idea, maybe from academia, and it's probably going to be pushed through the private sector to actually have impact. Yeah.
Thanks. Lydia, what's your take on this?
I think I kind of thought the same thing, that in academics, there are going to be exciting advances in algorithms, the way it has been before. But but in the industry, the types of things, the advances that would be most beneficial, at least in where I'm working, is the infrastructure itself. So sorry, I'm losing my words. The data stores and processing data, things like that. Sorry.
Thanks. Senor, how about you?
Cool. So, yeah, I mean, like, also excited about what's been said before. I think one thing for me that I'm really excited for is what I'm going to call like normal size deep learning, and like machine learning in general, where we kind of like have advances in doing really good machine learning on like smaller data sets and like more tangible ones for the average company and team, because that'll allow like standard startups, or not standard, I mean like standard companies to really use machine learning and deep learning, and that will allow us to solve more problems. Because like I was looking it up earlier today, and like OpenAI's GPT-3 estimated costs like $12 million, and like who has $12 million to train that model, and them having it and like sort of like giving out as a service, they're still totally in control of that. But we want people from every country, everywhere, to be able to solve their own problems with whatever limited capital they have. So I'm just really excited to see, I guess we can call it democratizing machine learning, but just to make it like accessible to basically everyone that's got a good enough idea that can solve an actual problem. Yeah.
So that would be on a data scale, so not having need as much data. I guess that would help in low resource environments, but then also in a hardware perspective that we don't have.
Yes.
A million TPUs. Okay. Fantastic. Would you like to round us out, Jeannie?
Okay, so I think for me, what I would like to see in the industry and in research is more focused. So research and industry applying the machine learning to address more real world problems. So I think there's a lot of machine learning being applied to things that simply don't need machine learning, and there's a plethora of problems that genuinely need help, but that are being overlooked completely. And I think academics and industry need to come together, because industry is motivated by profits, and then academics are motivated by like basically the H index. So what's going to drive up like profits or H index? So there needs to be a step back from like these incentives, and actually thinking, how can we turn our research into actually making like changes for good. So yeah.
Thank you everyone. Just before I round out, I just wanted to ask if any of you on our panel had closing thoughts, any comments you'd like to leave the audience. I'll give you a second to think before I call on someone. And Lydia, you are lucky number one.
No, I'm thinking of.
Okay, no worries.
No. I wanted to make a joke and say that we should compare our languages. I've been waiting for the question of should I use Python? Should we use R?
Oh, okay, yeah. Okay, I think that's a great way to round out. So according to the polls, I think the most popular language is Python. So what is your take on this? What is your favorite programming languages? This will be our final question. Lydia, what's yours?
Okay. My answer to that is that you shouldn't be married to a language. You should be married to principles.
Very wise.
Really,
Very wise.
a language is just a tool. So the one that works in your situation is the one that you should use. But what you should keep in mind, especially in industry and working in a team, is that someone else might need to pick up your work and take it further. So you have to program in a way that's understandable, and keep on committing to Git all the time, because you don't know what's going to happen to you or your laptop in a day's time. Yeah.
Super. Senor, your favorite language, your take, and any closing comments?
So my favorite language is Rust, just in general. But a language, like as Lydia was saying, a language is just a tool. Honestly, if you can get work done in it, and it's not going to be a pain to use down the line, like C++, I guess, it's difficult to maintain, whereas Python isn't as difficult. Yeah, I think it's fine. Like the most important thing is that you can achieve your goals at the end, and like build a product or do your research, and solve cool problems. So I think as much as like we obsess over our tools, and like it's cool to debate about which language makes you most productive, blah blah blah. Like as long as you're solving something cool, I think it's fine. Cool.
Jeannie.
Yeah, so I think for me, the question around programming languages, again, is like, what do you need to solve this problem? But I think also a lot can be said for what you learn when you learn a language. So for me, for example, the first time I worked with C was the first time I really understood how the computer interprets my instructions. So, and that depth of understanding I would have never gotten if I just started with Python and stuck to Python. So I think a lot can be said for learning different languages, different types of languages. Yeah, again, it's a what do you need to know? You don't, like Senor said, if you're learning, if you don't need to know it, you don't need to know it. Like, unless a professor is telling you to do it. Yeah. But otherwise, Python's my favorite.
Kalia, the final word is left to you.
Okay, just on the languages thing, I want to reiterate what Lydia said. Yeah, don't be committed to language. See what has the most support and be practical. Yeah, and I guess closing comments, I would say from my perspective, just try and leverage your communities. Definitely apply for mentorship. The Indaba Mentorship Committee has put a lot of work into sort of the mentorship platform. So please try and leverage your communities because yeah, I think it really will help you go further. And yeah, I guess that's how I started in this machine learning field. And I think it's very beneficial for all of us to help each other go forward.
Thank you. Thank you everyone tonight. Thank you so much for accepting the invitation. I must say I sat with stars in my eyes as the acceptance came through. A lot of imposter syndrome there as well. But it was really great to hear from all of you this evening. We've all enjoyed it. I'd also like to send out a huge thank you to Julianne, who's been gluing the situation together. Thank you very much for working tirelessly in the background. And also a special shout out to Nerves Designer, who did our awesome Star Wars Day posts. Very excited about that. And then finally, if you enjoyed this evening, we'd love to have you join us again. We have another panel scheduled for later this month, which will be taking on more of an academic perspective, and we'd love to have you join. Thank you very much, everyone, and we hope to see you online soon. Bye.
Awesome. Thanks for the conversation.
Okay, bye everyone.
Bye.